This budget is built on what you have been telling me through the whole year to get to this point. So hopefully there's not a lot of surprises in here to any of you of what's there. It's just a matter of what priorities we want to set from this point forward.
Mr. Elston.
I do have a question, though, about determining the advertised tax rate before we've had a discussion about the CIP and public safety and utilities.
Good question. I think we'll talk about the reason for that tonight. Right now.
We're going to talk about that right now. So we're going there.
Will you send out this new calendar? The calendar you showed is different from the calendar.
It's the same calendar, except I just have more detail on it.
Yeah. Can you just send that out to us?
Oh, absolutely. But they haven't seen it, so I just showed it right then. So.
Maybe they need it too.
They do. In terms of advertising and tax rate, the way the Commonwealth laws are written, we have to advertise a tax rate based on the general circulation of newspapers and publications in this area to meet our public hearing date. Maybe I should have gone back. So. You think so? I know I should have. To meet our public hearing date of April 25th of having it advertised, we need to set a advertised tax rate now to meet our statutory requirements of time to do that. I think your question is a valid one of the numbers that I've given you. The 1.4 is what I would consider a baseline just to cover the existing services and things that we've talked about so far. The 1.415 is based on what we have forecast and gives you a little bit of cushion to talk about other issues that you may or may not want to fund in the budget. Other issues that are more significant than that, I think, are things that you need to talk about right now. If there are particular things that you would like for us to consider in this budget, then we can set a advertised rate high enough to accommodate that at your pleasure.
Well, I would certainly suggest that we need to have a conversation about the public safety building. And right now, it's in the CIP for 2020, and it's at a very high rate. And if we want to start building our capacity to move on a public safety building, it seems to me we should do that sooner rather than later. But there are also, I've got questions about cuts in this proposed budget to patrol for police, for communications to police, in Parks and Rec to the Parks and Forts. It's a significant drop. Events is a significant drop. And then we have, and I'm a little confused when I read this about the fire and rescue staffing and whether we're at an appropriate level there when I read this. So,
okay.
So those, it seems to me, are pretty big, just to finish that thought, are pretty big issues that seem to me we have to resolve before we can decide on an advertised tax rate.
Okay. And to some extent, that's one of the issues when you're dealing with a budget as large as ours is. There are monies that get moved around from place to place to accommodate management of those facilities. But in the areas that you talked about, none of those areas have significant cuts from existing services. So in police patrol, what the chief was talking about in his presentation, and again, as another part of that, you've heard from all of the departments over the last 2 months as part of their presentation. Yeah. In police patrol, the issue that the chief has had, and he can speak for himself here shortly as well, that they've had is because of vacancies, they have not had as many officers that they've been able to dedicate to just doing traffic control because they've been required to respond to calls. As we build their force back up to full strength, then they will be able to allocate those folks back there. And the budget is built on having all of those police officers in there. Our issue is making sure that we can hire, train, and keep those police officers. Doug, you
said my license, sir. I'll be glad to answer specific questions if you have.
Well, I do. I'm looking for the page here.
While he's looking, can I make a request, John?
Yes, sir.
In the past, I've asked for the average real estate tax bill total tax rate for the last 3 years, so we can see the, you know.
That's actually in there.
Is it in here?
I think.
We can see the information for the last 3 years in terms of the total impact on the rates. Usually you give us.
There's an average residential tax
Yeah,
bill
in this
by
form,
class.
please, in this format, yeah, in this format. In this format. You've given that to us before. In other words, this box right here.
Yeah, I don't remember us doing that before, but I think that's the last couple of budgets.
Thank you.
That's what we're going to do.
Mr. Elston, are you ready there? And we'll come back to
It's a
this.
pretty big.
Okay, go ahead.
Lovejoy.
And this may be the same vein as what Ken is discussing, but on page 5, it does show that you have found a $3.2 million reduction in operations through purchase power and efficiency savings.
And that is what's, when you see our utility rates going down, that is all in your electric rate, and primarily that is what our fuel surcharge, that would be there, so that is being reduced, and that's why you see a reduction in the utility rates.
Since that amount is in an enterprise fund, the savings from that don't translate.
It does not impact the general fund at all.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, while Kim was looking at that, one of the things that I will put out is in the fire department, not that the police department, if you want to ask him what he could do with additional officers, he's got a good list that he could do there as well. In the fire department, what we have done is we fully funded the existing fire positions this year as a part of what we're proposing. So in the past couple of years, they have been underfunded. So we're funding the full amount of those this year. We have been discussing, because of the volunteers, going to 12-hour day shifts. And Brett did ask for 2 positions to do that. Those are not included in the budget at this point in time. That would be about $160,000 in additional funds to support those 2 positions and the various equipment and other things that they have to have.
Mr. Wolfe.
The item that's not reflected in the budget, I'm correct, goes back to the discussion in the council on Monday with regard to enhancing public safety retention. And to me, that is my number 1 pressing concern. And I realize we're not going to solve that today. We're not going to solve anything today other than PRCC. But I do applaud the manager for the budget he's come up with, because I do think it is fair, and we have continue to realize economies of scale and efficiencies in our operations. With that, I would suggest that we adopt an advertised rate so that we have just a little bit of room to the manager's suggestion of $1.41.5 all in. I'm making a motion.
And just so folks would know, this chart shows the impact of that. And I think we can actually hand that out. We can pass that around to you as well.
Mr. Pate, Mr. Pate, let me ask you a question. Again, process oriented. I have a motion that hasn't been seconded, but how much more do you have in your presentation to the council tonight?
I am finished with what my planned presentation. It was only to start answering questions related to setting a tax.
Okay, any more charts?
We've got one that we're handing out to you. The only thing I've got is the same thing we're handing out to you. I've got just so we can put it up on the screen. Okay, which basically just has the 3. What you'll see on this chart is basically what the motion that's on the floor now of the 1.415, which is what we've been forecasting. I had shown the 1.4, which was the kind of, from my standpoint, a minimal amount. And then if we were still doing the school agreement and we're looking at 4%, that's the third option that's there, which is roughly the same, just a little bit less than what the forecasted numbers would have been.
Can you just talk about that school option, just to remind us all again?
On
the last one, the school agreement?
This last agreement, the 4% there, is if, as we have been operating before we changed the school agreement, that was based on a average of 4% increase in the real estate rate each year. So if we had still been operating under the prior school agreement, then I would have recommended a tax rate to you of 1.413.
But because we made a new agreement with the schools unanimously, which provides them more money than we did previously, now the tax rate that you're recommending on the forecast is the 1.415. Is that correct?
The forecasted rate is, what was in the 5-year forecast was 1.415. What I'm saying, that's what I'm recommending that you advertise at a minimum, quite honestly. And then if you do that, what I've said is that gives you flexibility in the budget because what's in here can be funded on a 1.4. So it's basically 1.5 cents worth of flexibility for council to discuss if you choose.
Can we visit some questions now?
Absolutely, Mr. Elston.
If we look at page 161 of the budget, under division summaries, that's where I was looking at patrol services and communications,
Please.
and I was seeing budget reductions.
For the control service, honestly, a $9,000 change there off of a $7 million budget is around here.
Okay, fair enough. So we're looking at thousands.
It looks like they're just
We're looking
realigning,
at
it looks like they're
thousands now.
realigning
Yeah.
between their divisions.
That's all we're looking
And
at.
quite honestly,
This was just
if you
why it's a
look at-
question.
that is likely because positions got transferred during the year, so somebody that was in patrol is now in investigations.
Okay, that's fair enough. And I saw some of that other changing that I thought was larger, I just saw was breaking out in different divisions, so that was.
One thing to remember, this will help as well, someone retires at a high rate, we hire at a lower rate, the new budget is based off the new lower rate instead of the older rate. So that will cause some change
And because
as
of that.
well.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, but help me with that, the revenue is still there.
The way that works is that we have an overall compensation plan. So on an individual basis, yes, you do have some people that retire and we hire people at a lower rate. But we're also giving people raises during the year. One of the things that we talked, just as a quick thing about what we have done for the police department and actually the fire department and a couple of other departments as well this year, but the police is a good example. One of the things that we did this year is we created a career path for police officers. So before there was just one class of police officers, now we have basically a recruit pay grade and then a police officer 1, 2, and 3. After they meet certain criteria, length of service, training, etc., they can move from a 1 to a 2, which would give them an increase, and then additional experience training, they can move to a 3. So those are built in. So part of our overall plan, we always accommodate that stuff that's in there when we're looking at it from a global perspective instead of individual. Maybe I didn't answer your question, but maybe the chief did.
It's good. Mr. Elston.
Page 197, just looking at, and again, this may seem a little nitpicky in terms of numbers, but in terms of this parks and courts, that's a significant reduction there. Just curious what's going on there. For events, curious, because those are on fairly razor thin margins anyway, operationally.
Yeah, I believe the Parks and Forts, that the additional money there was the funds that we put in for the Parks and Cultural Study. So that was really a one-time amount that was added into 16 that we have not continued for 17.
So after one-time reduction.
Right.
You have no expenditure in 15.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask, since we're...
Stand by, Mr. Levine.
Go ahead.
And then on that same page, to look at events, we went from essentially 100,000 to half that to a tenth of that. So,
Thank you. That helps.
what's that?
Just thinking out loud.
I'm just looking, at our historic heart.
What's under events? Yeah, part of that
Fourth of July.
could I think that's,
Fourth of July.
4th of July is probably a
Fourth
big.
of July salary.
Is-
It's just a reallocation throughout, it really is just a reallocation of, it's somewhere else in the budget.
Okay.
It's salaries pertaining to that we realigned elsewhere, so it's not a cut.
Okay.
To put it in a different, more appropriate line item.
I would prefer not to cut out the historic part,
No.
since we have it on all our sides now.
Thank you. I agree with that.
Beating.
It's beating, as I understand it.
I will say, when you're looking at these items, I give department heads a lot of flexibility to move their money
Fair enough.
around so that they have the ability within their department to meet the needs that they're having on a year-to-year basis. So you will see places like this where there's some funds that move from spot to spot. But they basically have in reality, they've had a mandate for over the last several years to maintain their budget within what they've been doing for the previous year, and then they allocate that to the best way they can. And then we give raises to employees, and that's been the only real increase they've got. Capital is a little different, so you will see one-time projects in capital. That will have an impact on a lot of those.
And so along those lines, then, that leaves the last question that I had for tonight, which is that public safety building, that capital expenditure. What kind of impact should we actually be expecting?
All right,
If you want to try to cover the capital portion of it Monday night, or you want to have some discussion about that now?
Well, I think in terms of the question you're asking now is, should we begin planning for that by dealing with some funding sources for the public safety building?
Yes, and if
Okay.
we're doing that, then the advertised rate should reflect that. At
And
least allow us capacity to have that conversation.
and that's going to be a philosophical issue for council. I'll tell you from my standpoint, we have put additional debt service in the budget to purchase land, and in essence, that will probably do a design of a facility with that. If we are successful in buying land, I believe it will take us at least a year to go through the process of hiring somebody to look at the facility, making sure that we've got the right things done and to basically design a facility that will meet our needs. So from a debt service standpoint, the money is there to buy the land, which I think is the most critical piece. There will be money there to do the design work of that. The actual building of a facility and the financing of that, I don't think that would be, you would see those costs in this year. Now, if you remember the Davenport study that was done to fund all of our CIP as it was set out last year, now that we have, if we're just looking at the city portion of it, they were estimating 4.9 cents to do that overall. In this budget, some of that's covered. I've got a little bit of money in there for the land, so that piece of it's covered. There will be additional cost of doing that. We are looking at some other financing options that might reduce some of those costs. Again, we're looking at the scope and the size. So I don't have an exact number to tell you. I think it will be less than 4.9 to do all the things that we talked about, if that's what council moves forward with. But I don't, if we set up, just for example, if we added an additional cent this year for capital improvements, I would say we take that and we would put it in our debt service account. That will help us build capacity so that you wouldn't have to add that in the future. And if the right things come along, or if we can move things quicker, then that might help move forward. But if you were going to try to advance fund the basic set up the tax rate now, that would fund the public safety facility. I honestly don't have a good number to tell you how much that tax impacts.
Fair enough, but I think my suggestion to council would be that we do start to build our reserve capacity.
Mr. Beatty, then Mr. Lovejoy.
Yes, first observation, in the past, although we got away from it and I'm beginning to think that wasn't a good idea, we used to have a discussion on each department. So fire and rescue would come in and police would come in and they would talk briefly about these. And it seems like we've gotten away from that, but just listening to the questions and the way we're doing things this evening, perhaps that wasn't a bad idea to go through each of these briefly.
Well,
I don't know that we're planning on doing that, are we?
on the
No, at all through the budget process.
on the operating on the second session for operating, that's, our intent was to go through.
You're going to go
and deal
department
with-
by department. You're going to say fire and rescue highlights are this, this, and this?
If you would like to go department by department, yes, we can do that. Now, I wasn't planning on having every department head in here to do that. The chiefs, I know that there's questions about the public safety areas, so they've been asked to be here Wednesday of next week to address items out of their budget.
Right, and so my suggestion would be like under fire and rescue, I don't see any mention of the SAFER grant, and I know when the chief spoke to us last at council, he talked a little bit about staffing, and I'm not sure whether that's an unmet need, that need has been satisfied, and I also would just comment that if we do the schedule that you provided, it would be useful if we said we're going to talk about fire and rescue on this night, police on this night, so we in the public, if they want to show up for a particular topic, know when that's going to be discussed. And we seem to have gotten away from that, so.
Well, at least from my perspective, y'all can, if you want to do something different, the intent is to talk about the capital improvement section on next Monday.
Understood.
Before the public
Okay.
hearing. And then on Wednesday, to talk about the operational section, which is this main
So
section.
all the
that has
departments
department
on Wednesday?
budgets and utility, yes.
You can go through everything, utilities and departments on Wednesday, all in one night.
That was our intent, yes.
Okay.
Depending on how many questions you
It'll be a
have.
long night.
It's gonna be a good night.
Okay. Okay, and we'll hear about the SAFER grant and staffing at that point.
I mean, the SAFER grant's expired.
Gone.
It's been gone.
But our replacement of those positions,
Those positions are in the budget.
okay, so they're in the budget.
And they have been.
They have been.
And so there's no,
Additional positions, requests were given to the city manager. They are not funded in the budget.
okay,
He's
But that's
fully
not
funding the
SAFER.
existing.
That's,
but the SAFER grant requirement has been met.
the existing positions are funded in this budget, which included the positions that 4 years ago or something were originally brought on by the SAFER grant. My understanding is, and that's before I got here, but there was 2 years worth of funding for that. There was a requirement that those be funded by the city. That was done, and we have continued those positions. The positions have been in the budget the whole time. The only difference has been is that the last couple of years, the positions were there, but based on the allocation of funds, I asked the chief not to fill all of his positions.
And that remains in this budget?
In this budget, we are not where he would be allowed to fill all of his positions.
Yeah, we're saying it backwards. So we still had those two positions that we kept them on the books, we didn't get rid, but we were not filling them.
2 positions are
That's
frozen.
current year.
And this year, we're filling them. Is that
In
correct?
17, we're filling them.
That's significant.
Yes.
Okay. But somehow that wasn't mentioned.
I didn't mention that, but.
You did? Okay, I must have missed it, I'm sorry. You mentioned it tonight
And Monday night.
and Monday night? Okay, good.
I heard it.
Okay, Mr. Vaney, or.
Yes, sir.
You're
Thank
good.
you. Mhm.
Is your question about this topic, Mr. Elston?
So on this topic, for staffing, fire and rescue, knowing that the fire and rescue committee has made certification requirements for our volunteers, that some of which will not be met, as I understand it. Is the staffing that's represented then sufficient to cover that ingredient? The staffing needs, once, because that's coming up, isn't it?
Tomorrow night? We're going to talk about it.
Tomorrow night's the meeting,
Yeah.
but the certification issue.
Right.
Tomorrow night.
There is,
Oh, that is tomorrow night, is the
Yeah, yeah,
deadline?
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
drop dead deadline? Thank you, sir.
Good timing.
Brett can probably, I'll give you my take on it, and he'll fill in what's the gaps. There have been, and there continues to be, criteria to serve in various officer positions, whether you're a career or a volunteer. Some of the volunteers have not been able to meet all the criteria for the positions to which they were elected. Most of them have, to my understanding, have resigned if they knew they weren't going to meet those positions, those qualifications. So there are a number of them that meet the qualifications and will still be in those roles. There are some that didn't meet those qualifications and won't be. To the extent that when you have a fire vehicle that goes out, and I'll probably let Brett do this, there has to be certain number of kind of people on that.
That's the
so
question.
that has to be dealt with, and we talked directly about plans to make sure that we meet those qualifications or criteria.
Yeah, I mean, just for a little bit of background, 4 years ago was a uniform rank structure. Actually, yeah, 4 years, well, 4 years ago last November, so it's been 4.5, going over 4 years that the criteria were established. We had a deadline of November of 2014 to achieve, that was written into the procedure. In this past year, we held them accountable, and Mr. Avini helped facilitate. We had discussions with President Lesnick, Chief Orndorff, about how to do that. And so tomorrow was the established deadline for achieving that. I will say that not all of the officers have resigned the company. They've just resigned their officer position, dropped down to be firefighters.
Another clarification on
Yes. So what does that mean for staffing levels? We're working with Chief Orndorff on clarifying that. We know that over the next few months for sure, we will have to provide some career staff when the volunteers are supposed to be staffing the engine. We're trying to get a good handle on that, working with Chief Orndorff on what that means. But we're still working with them on getting their people certified to get them up to the levels. So that's a work in progress. There are other issues when we talk about the staffing. I think that you're bringing up. Right now, we're bringing people in every morning, weekday morning at 5:36. When we really don't, our workday doesn't start till 7. Bring them in early because the volunteers have to go to work. And we're holding people over when we're supposed to be off at 5 o'clock because the volunteers aren't there yet at 5 o'clock. So that was a request that we put into Mr. Pate for 2 positions to expand our daytime hour of coverage from, right now we go from 7 in the morning to 5 in the evening, to go to 6 to 6. That will alleviate most of it. If somebody leaves at 5:30, we still have to bring somebody in for a half hour early, but it's a continuous thing that we have to do.
And to satisfy that would be the 160,000
Yes.
additional?
Yes.
Yeah,
To fund those 2 positions.
right now, as of Thursday night, we're going to have to go to minimum staffing on some units. If the volunteers need a career staff to ride as officers, if we're already minimally staffed, we'll be bringing people in on overtime. We're monitoring our overtime budget. It is up there this year, but part of that, quite frankly, is due to we had some vacancies that, again, April 4th is, I have 6 new people starting. It'll take them a few months before they'll be able to be counted as staffing, but that will get us up to a better position. And come July 1, if this budget moves forward, getting those 2 other positions back to get us up. As I told Mr. Wolfe back when we originally got the 12 safer positions, if the expectation of the career staff remains the same, those number of people are what I need. If we expand our hours, then you need more, but if we stay where we are, that 60 total FTEs was sufficient. But we are having to do some more. Just this past weekend, I had to put a career staff on for 24 hours for the volunteers because I didn't have a driver. So, I mean, that is creeping up. There are issues, and it's not here in Manassas, it's throughout the world, the dwindling of volunteer fire and rescue. I saw a chart from Pennsylvania where in the past 10 years, the number of volunteer firefighters have dropped 50% in 10 years. So it's a national issue.
And I will say, I've met independently with both volunteer chiefs, or no, not volunteer chiefs, both volunteer presidents of their groups. The sense I get is appreciation for the effort that our career staff is putting in to help them recruit volunteers and to get folks available. And so we're, again, from what I am told, I think we do a much better job of recruiting volunteers and keeping volunteers than pretty much anywhere around us. And you don't have to look any further than the Prince William County budget, where they're having to add career staff in to replace volunteers where they do not have volunteers that are showing up in those areas. I think the 12-hour shifts is just a reality of life today, not a perception of our volunteers not wanting to be here. If you've got to commute into DC, you can't stay here till 7 in the morning.
And that going to 6 to 6.
If you're commuting back from DC, you're not going to get in here at 5 o'clock.
That 6 to 6 shift, Prince William County went to back in the mid-'80s, the late '80s, started that transition because they were experiencing that. We've held on for quite a while, but we were experiencing that here.
So if that 12-hour shift were to become a reality, it would take another half cent, essentially, for those two positions.
No, that's not a half cent, that's more like a third.
A third, sorry.
About 3/10 of the cent.
3/10,
okay. Yeah, 1 cent's about $460,000.
Okay, are we good?
Thank you.
Mr. Lovejoy?
If it's still in order, I'd like to second Mr. Wolf's motion.
It is.
1.415.
We have
It was the advertised tax rate of
We have a motion
1.415.
on the floor made by Mr. Wolfe, seconded by Mr. Lovejoy, to advertise 1.415 as a rate. Real estate tax rate.
Non-real estate tax.
That's combined. Fire and rescue and general fund tax. Any discussion? Mr. White?
I'd like to ask a question, which will do nothing but show my tenuous grasp of mathematics. If I look at the total residential over on the far right, I see that their increase is 4.47%. The total commercial is 4.87%. But the total of the average of the two is less than either. And I don't understand how that works.
Try me again, Mr. White.
On the far right,
slower.
total residential went up 4.47%.
I see it.
Total commercial went up 4.87%. Total went up 4.2%, which is less than either the residential or the commercial. And I would have thought that it would lie in the middle someplace. But I don't understand the mathematics of that.
Well, and you see the same thing up above and down below.
Yeah,
too.
it's whatever it is, it's the same. I just don't understand.
Distribution. Well,
Now, I can see the total residential 4.47 being between 3.38 and, is it 6.44?
yeah.
I can see that, obviously it's stated in the same form. But, yeah, I think the 4.21% is.
I will tell you that I totally agree with you. I think the numbers should be in between those two, so I'm not sure what's wrong with the, there's probably a formula error in there somewhere. Or there's something that's.
That could materially impact the attractiveness of whatever rate that we're picking.
Well, again, this is just an advertised.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing, hearing none, then Mr. Pate, help me out with that.
Sorry.
Your budget, and I'm looking at the top one on our sheet now, your budget, which includes all those pieces that you've talked about tonight, staffing, additional money for capital, and so forth, that we're going to hear more about, is 1.4.
That's correct.
And it has some additional money in it for pieces that we are not net funding.
There are some new things in there.
Okay. The tax rate, the one in the middle, what you call the tax rate based on a forecast. You and I had this conversation earlier today, and I'm like Mr. Way, I'm a little, I shouldn't put my word into his language. I'm just dense. So help me out. The forecast, what do we mean by the forecast? Is that the forecast that we had before the
It's
council's agreement with the school board at the 2.625%?
you know, this is the one, when, as a part of the council discussions about setting a funding agreement with the schools, one of the questions that was asked of us was to come back and prepare a 5-year forecast based on those numbers.
And that was provided that night that the council and the school board.
Exactly. In that projection, what we said is, if we add 2.625 to the schools, and we basically provide a 2% increase for shared services, for capital investments, and for departments, then the combined amount that we would need to generate out of the property real estate rate would be 4.625. And so we basically set a forecast with an amount that would cover basically a 2% city increase and a 2.625 increase on the school amount of the general fund budget. And that generates a number
That's what you're
that we needed in revenue.
That's
And that's the forecast, to generate that amount of money, that's what we're calling the forecast rate.
Okay, all right. And that rate would be 1.41.
1.5, that's correct.
Okay. And the rate down below at the very bottom, the 1/3 of the bottom of that sheet, is a 4% increase in the average tax bill. It's actually 4.06, but
That's as close as you can get it. Here's the tax rate.
we got the same calculation problem with that one as we do the other one. And it's the same above on the first one as well.
Yeah, they'll figure out what's causing the difference on these rates. The way it's, and what's it, you must be a formulator.
But I don't want to vote on this if we don't think these are accurate. They are accurate?
But the two numbers represent the full cost of real estate potential.
Stand by, everybody. Let's let our staff. Mr. Elston.
The other question,
Mr. Elston.
the other question that I have, and I think this is information that more Mr. Pate and you, Mr. Mayor, have, which is an investigation into our credit rating and maintaining that and what the forecast is. And I haven't, this year, we haven't talked about that, what it takes, what the concerns are and what it will take to maintain the rating that we want. And just not having heard it, I'd kind of like a little window to that.
Mr. Pate, I think what Mr. Elston's talking about is 13 versus 15%.
That's the basis of it.
And there's two parts to that. One of the things that we asked you to do last year, which you did, was adopt a series of financial policies. Those financial policies are based on best practices. I mean, individual jurisdictions can put in different numbers of how they want to do that. But from the rating agencies, they like to see that we've got a set of financial practices and policies that we're following. And we were following those, now they are documented. So those are in place, and everything we do in terms of budget preparation for you falls back on those financial principles. So that, on the fund balance piece, what our policy says is we want to be between 13 and 15, which basically means we're not going to fall below 13. Our intent is to build that up to 15%, and then from that point forward, the additional money would go into our one-time capital fund. So this year, to the extent we can either generate more revenues than were projected or have less expenditures, which is typically what happens when departments save money doing things, if there's a difference there, that money will go towards building that 13% up towards the 15%. So we do anticipate every year when we put together a budget, departments they have to live within their means, and we are hopeful if our revenues are coming in real short, we're going to come back in and have to do something. And they're coming in on target this year, maybe a little bit higher in one or two areas. So we hope that will help us build that 13% somewhere towards the 15%. It'll probably take us a couple of years to actually do that, but that's where we're going. That policy and the other things that we're doing in terms of that we've done with Davenport, in terms of debt capacity, in terms of how our ratios are, we've got policies in there to kind of keep us within the realm of what other similar type cities in our situation that have very high credit ratings are doing. It doesn't mean we're exact in every area, but the real bottom line to your question is we believe that this budget will maintain our credit rating And it'll probably take us adding some to fund balance to basically move up to the AAA. And some of that's based on per capita population costs of our
I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if we have a goal to move up our credit rating.
Hold on, everyone.
If we have a goal to move up our credit rating, and we have a goal to make rather large capital investments in the near future, I think that's important that we keep our eye on that. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought it up because it is something that was brought up in our discussions in New York. And we will be going back to New York for funds indebtedness in the relatively near future. And we'll want to make sure that we have those things considered. And Mr. Pate makes a very good point, though, that the documentation is done accurately. Mr. Bain.
I guess you guys are still figuring.
It's fair.
They're saying that the math works out, so I think the issue there is to forget about the total, because there's probably some, we'll figure it out before our next meeting. But my guess is there's some issue there with the units are calculating when you combine commercial and residential. The number of residential units versus the high dollar of commercial probably works out to have some kind of percentage that's less. If you're looking at, what y'all typically tend to look at is if single family on that top line, or is on the third line there, if we adopt the 415 that we're talking about, then you're showing single family would have a 4% increase. So I think that the total may just be not a valid number because of the way units are divided out by. I think the math works out, but just units and commercial value versus the number of units.
I think what happens is when you add the total assessed values and then divide it by the total number of units, that number is going to become somewhat diluted if you try to look at it, whether it's residential or commercial, because of the number of residential
units are
parcels
different.
that are out
Yeah.
there. It's the difference in the
Let me just speak for myself. I don't want to speak for the council, but I would hope that the staff would have this remedied by the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll have an explanation.
Nevertheless, let me ask him, I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you had a sense, what's the difference dollar-wise between city manager proposed budget and tax rate based on forecast budget? The difference between the three?
690,000.
690,000.
What was that question, Mr. Vane?
What was the difference in funds between these two? How much more money? It's about a penny and a half.
Right. If you actually adopted 1.415 as opposed to the 1.4, then that generates an additional $690,000.
Let me ask one more question. What is our current combined tax rate?
1.388. And that's on the sheet.
It's the very top number.
And Mayor, just to bear repeating, at the city manager proposed budget, that includes the additional money for the schools and everything that's in your...
Everything that I've been talking about that was included is in that rate. And then other things we've been talking about tonight are not. You know, there's no extra MBTA money, there's no money for the...
Well, the 350 is in there, right? Or not? That you showed us earlier?
That money's coming out of MBTA funds. That is in here. That's not tax dollars. That's 30% money that we're using to fill that gap in the proposed.
I want to make sure that I understand, and I think I do, but the MBTA money that you just mentioned not being in there is what?
We do not have a dedicated source of funds for MBTA.
Because you're covering it for 17.
For 17, we're covering it
From the gas
with, no, the 30% money is being covered primarily by utility funds, most of which is going to be debt is bonds, and a little bit of ongoing operating for water and electric work connected to road projects.
Prince William's bid.
In 18.
In 18, we've got a whole. That's correct.
Mr. Lovejoy.
No, I'm good.
Mr. White.
Just an information question, what's the average percent salary increase for the staff in this budget?
In this budget, we're doing a market-based pay, so the short answer is 3%. Although that for people that are above market rate, It may not be quite 3%, people that are below market rate may get a little more, but in average, it's based on a 3% increase, which is the same as Prince William County. So we're trying to stay, not lose folks. Probably. Most of the areas around us are adding more money than we're able to.
The county's doing 3.
3% of the county's doing, that's what I'm proposing.
Well, it hasn't been approved yet.
Yeah, the proposed budget has 3. The county has typically been on a schedule of 3-2, 3-2. So the last time they did 3, we only did 2. So even if they go back to 2 this year, we'd still just be catching up from the 3 we didn't do.
Okay. Very good.
You still have more.
Any further discussion? We do have a motion on the floor. The motion is for a combined tax rate to advertise of 1.415.
Under what advertised.
Everybody ready? Ms. Madden, if you could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Wolfe?
Yes.
Councilmember Lovejoy?
Yes.
Councilmember Haney?
Yes.
Councilmember Bass?
Yes.
Councilmember Elston?
No.
Councilmember Wade?
Yes. That motion carries 5 to 1. Council members, I am thankful that this body can, in my view, do its job. I haven't mentioned any others, but you all, I appreciate the fact that you're working at it and making sure that we pick up what I think are the responsibilities are.
I had 12 motion sheets for that. Anybody wants to hang around?
Hold on for next year.
Anybody who wants to add.
Well, that was last year.
Yeah.
That's right, that's charming.
Every year's
Don't even
different.
say that.
Well,
Every year's different.
What are we done?
Mr. Pace, do you have anything else for the council tonight?
We have accomplished what I hope we've accomplished tonight.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Mayor, can I just repeat, I have been talking to people who are interested to know this budget schedule and what we will be discussing what night. So while we have the schedule, it sounds like there's a few more details that possibly could be added if you're going to mail that out to us, just so people can see what night we're discussing.
On the calendar, if you get.
Yes.
On your weekly
That'll be
calendar,
updated.
we'll update it on
I
that.
appreciate that, thank you. Specifically, the tax relief for the elderly and the
Okay.
departments.
And that one will be later on in the process.
Okay, anything else to come before the council for the good of our citizens? We're adjourned.
Thanks, sir.
Now.
Sir.